If you study history on a day-to-day and a detailed basis, you'll find that it's pretty ugly. Human nature, which is something that may not be as real as we think it is, has been the same all the way back to 5,000 years ago that we have records about. Um, British common law is based on Roman law, which goes back about 1,500 years at least. And you'll find statutes there about not ripping off your neighbor and price fixing and things like that. Same problems we have now. So slavery moved on into something else where some people were going to make a lot of money in quotation marks. And if you're going to make a lot of money, that means other people are working for you for very little. And when the United States was set up, there was a thing called the Virginia Company. And the Virginia Company was backed mainly out of England, possibly some money from France. I'm not sure about that. But those people wanted to make a lot of money. And people were brought over from the continent on the hopes of religious freedom and some opportunity, but they knew they were going to have to work because this was a land that was all resources and no infrastructure. And let's not forget there was a genocide of the locals involved, which has been swept under the table. So, similar to the broad generalization that Australia was populated with criminals from England. They don't like to hear that. It's not exactly true. A lot of people were just forced out of England for on any excuse to go and populate Australia. And all the culture that was developed in Europe from the Greeks and the early Egyptians and the Sumerians was not brought over in any hurry from the continent. So although America became a huge money source because of all the raw resources, there wasn't a lot of culture, and that's the way people who wanted to make a lot of money like it. Now, these ideas that I'm discussing are psychedelic, and these ideas are the antithesis of slavery. And this is why marijuana, which is a mild drug but a really good psychedelic, is illegal in the US, and they're so adamant about stomping it out. If I had a nickel for every time somebody smoked marijuana and said, what if we're just a little sliver on a molecule in the finger of God, I'd have a lot of nickels. And that pretty well is the first thought that anyone has who smokes marijuana. Because those are true facts, and the chemicals in there change or introduce a new function which is lying dormant in the brain, which is the perception of higher and lower cosmoses from this viewpoint. In this universe, which has three dimensions, like all other universes have their own three dimensions. And the fact that we can't see all these dimensions at the same time is just a limit of our physical senses, and the fact that the knowledge of this has been hidden from us to keep us as producers of money rather than producers of a civilization of which we could be proud. There's a couple of things I missed in the last video, and one of them would be the sun. We can't see the six-dimensional sun. We only see the three-dimensional sun. And the leak over from the higher three dimensions is that intense radiation that is a little overwhelming for our eyes. It's like we're looking at the six-dimensional aspects of the sun that leak through a hole in our three-dimensional universe, and we only see the disk. The reason for the intense radiation is there's something shining on the sun that we're completely unaware of that gives us its sustenance and light. And why that is from the source point in World 1. There are an infinite number of different kinds of universes, and where we are, all we get to see is the long chain of events that tumble down through what's called the ray of creation from source point to here, and right beside us could be a completely different kind of universe that we're completely unable to participate in or be aware of because of our level of consciousness, and we only have our physical perceptions, and we only see the leak over of other dimensions here and very often miss what they really are. Another concept I miss is the quote black holes in the middle of all the galaxies. This again is an energy we're unable to perceive. We just perceive the effect, and these energies spin the galaxies. And this energy comes from the next level up, and we can't see it, but the astrophysicists know it's there, and it's not a mystery. It's the will of the Absolute being manifested with incredible power, looking at it from our scale. But since the whole thing is an idea, it's actually an effortless thing to spin all that matter from the level above that. Another psychedelic idea which I have from authority on high is the game of this universe is very near the end. One of the mistakes that was made here was all the creations that were made were discarded instead of being eliminated, as they usually are in universes. And the universe is full of matter that was abandoned, and it's being cleaned up, or the term for it is being as is, and some of it was lit up and spun just to make it pretty while that work was going on. So there is actually no other reason for the swirling galaxies of stars other than aesthetic. And the arena I'm heading for with this series is concepts on that level, where, as Jordan Maxwell says here, nothing in this world works the way you think it does. In a similar way to the electron astronomer in the last lecture, human astronomers have for the first time guessed the form of our own. Moreover, they have found the greatest concentration of such nebulae in the zenith, which is when you're looking straight up above you at the sky, and the opposite, the nadir of our Milky Way. That is, in the plane through which it is moving, and finding none at right angles along the plane of its diameter, which would be directly in front of us and directly behind us. Astronomers have supposed an obscuring layer there, but neither, of course, would our electronic astronomer observe other human universes above or below the path of its own, that is, in the sky overhead, or in the earth underfoot, where the nature of such human universes would be to move only over the surface of a greater sphere, the earth. In the first section of this chapter, we similarly suppose the vast army of nebulae moving over the surface of a greater sphere, the absolute one. Perhaps, after all, the obscuring layer is corroboration of this idea, and if so, then it is not a mere extension of nebulae which is obscured from us, but the very nature of the absolute. Such, were our analogy a true one, might prove the significance of the celestial phenomenon which appear to us as the Milky Way and far distant galaxies. They would represent sections of immense bodies, inconceivable and eternal to us, and of which we could say nothing, but that they must be live. But is it true? There can be no direct answer. We can only say that another scale of life, rightly studies, reveals phenomena closely comparable to those which we perceive in the heavens, and which there, on that immense scale, are beyond our comprehension. And we may add that since natural laws must be universal, and since man cannot himself invent a cosmic scheme, analogy which shows the correspondence between patterns created by such laws above and below is perhaps the only intellectual weapon strong enough for certain problems. It can, in any case, reveal relationships, so that in studying the electron in the human body, we see well the scale of the being who strives to appraise the structure, lifetime, and purpose of the many galaxies in comparison with the phenomena he witnesses. About the extragalactic nebulae, we have little knowledge save of their shape and distance. About our own galaxy, the Milky Way, we can say more. According to recent ideas, it is itself a spiral nebula, perhaps 60,000 light years in diameter and 10,000 light years thick. This visible part of the Milky Way we may take as a plain or sea of stars around the center of which circles our solar system, a pinpoint vessel upon that ocean. Since such a journey may take it several 100,000 years, it appears stationary against the unchanging background of thick stars to the extreme limit of man's observation, in the same way as a ship in mid-ocean appears stationary to its passengers against the unchanging watery horizon. Yet, move the ship of our solar system does, its course presently set towards the bright star Vega, which shines ahead and a little above the plane of the Milky Way itself. This means that the ship's motion is not exactly parallel to the surface of the sea, but cuts across it at an angle, as though rising with a wave. And this in turn means that the cross-section of the ship, or the plane of the solar system in which the planets move, is not at right angles to the surface of the galactic sea, but tilted at 55 degrees to it. In practice, we establish both the great plane of the Milky Way and the lesser plane of the solar system by the constellations, or legendary patterns of stars which lie around the horizon of each. Those that remark the compass points for the plane of the solar system are well known. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. At Gemini, and again at Sagittarius, the plane of the solar system is cut by the greater plane of the Milky Way. Or in our other figure, the cross-section of the ship intersects the surface of the sea. The constellations of Gemini and Sagittarius thus lie at right angles to the course of the solar system. And since the solar system is voyaging around the center of the Milky Way, one of them must represent the direction of this center, and the other the direction of its nearest edge. In fact, the mass of stars towards Sagittarius is denser, as we should expect looking through the width of the galaxy, and it is also broader, seeming to divide into two layers, as though we were in fact seeing more thickness of the galaxy at the greater distance. Towards Sagittarius, then, lies the galactic center. Towards Gemini, the nearest frontier of extragalactic space. Now we must seek an explanation of this strange idea that man can see a little into the past of the galaxy, a little into the depth and thickness of the sea upon which his solar system sails. How is this possible? The Milky Way is so vast that light takes 60,000 years to travel from one side of it to the other. This means that its nearer edge is about 10,000 light years from us, and its distant one 50,000 light years from us. In other words, the remotest stars towards Gemini appear to us in the positions they occupied 10,000 years ago, while those towards Sagittarius seem to stand where they in fact stood 50,000 years ago, at a time when familiar man was perhaps first appearing on Earth. We are literally looking into the past of the Milky Way. The farther we look the deeper into the past we see, and the explanation of this ability to look out of the galactic present lies in the slowness of the impulses of light, which provide our only means of perception, compared with the almost unimaginable vastness which it has to cross. Later, when we discuss the speeds of diffusion of different kinds of energy, we may indeed come to the conclusion that the scale of the galactic world implies the existence of some energy far faster than light, with which man is not yet acquainted. Meanwhile, if we suppose the whole Milky Way moving forward like all other systems in the universe, then we can say that the angle of our perception out of the plane of the present must be proportional to the speed of the Milky Way divided by the speed of light. In daily life, an exact comparable phenomenon results from the time taken for transmission of sound, which causes us to hear at a distant cry uttered seconds before, an echo, and so enables us to listen deeper into the past, the further off we stand. Thus we do not in reality look out over that imaginary sea or disk which represents the present Milky Way at all. We look down a cone extending through the galaxy's time or fourth dimension. For while stars near to us appear from 10 or 20 years behind this plane, others shine from their positions of 100, 1,000, or 10,000 years ago, in proportion to their distance. From our position, all these stars extending from the present backwards for dozens of millennia are seen superimposed, giving the illusion of that wide ring or wall of stars, which in fact we see. But as we calculated, on the far side of the galaxy, we see 5 times deeper into the past than we do on the near side. Precisely because of this greater distance, we see much more of its time, or fourth dimension, there. And it is only thus natural that the visible band of stars should be denser and thicker towards Sagittarius, where its center and greatest extension lie. Now, because the Milky Way is a spiral nebula, when we face Sagittarius, we address ourselves toward the center or source of its creative energy. Just as when we face the Sun, we address ourselves towards the center or source of the creative energy of the solar system. So also, when we face Gemini, we face away from this center, as at midnight. We look up into that part of the heavens in opposition to the Sun. Here then is an objective measure for the long-believed characters of the zodiacal signs. They are, in fact, a measure of our inclination towards the focus of our galaxy, as definite as the hours of the day are of our inclination towards the Sun. When the Sun is in Sagittarius, it means that the solar radiations and any unknown higher radiations from the focus of the Milky Way reach us from the same direction or are in conjunction. When the Sun is in Gemini, it means that the solar and galactic radiations reach us from opposite directions. And when we face the Sun in the intermediate signs of Virgo or Pisces, it means that we see it against the outer emptiness or against the invisible past and future of the Milky Way, whose central radiation reaches us at right angles to the solar rays. At present, we cannot specifically state the nature of the radiations which may be given off by the galactic center, but a general radiation of a few meters wavelength has been detected, which is notably stronger in the direction of the densest star clouds in the Milky Way, and strongest of all in the direction of Sagittarius. This radiation is now regarded as a definite characteristic of our galaxy, and particularly of its center, whose physical nature is hidden from us by star clouds. It is distinct from, but similar to what have been known as cosmic rays, which, reaching the Earth from all angles and directions, and being of higher frequency than any known to originate in the Sun, must also convey to us matter or influence from the vital center of some even greater world. And I will add here that that world is invisible to us without a higher level of consciousness. And this would be, or could be, so I was suggesting, the world that shines on the Sun with radiations that we don't understand, and the Sun lights up the same way the Sun lights up the Moon. We have posited this next greater world or cosmos above the solar system to be the Milky Way. But there are many indications that the gap in size here is impassably great. Later, when we come to measure the relative sizes and dimensions of the cosmoses which we have been able to identify, we shall see that the factor of multiplication between the solar system and the Milky Way is far greater than that between cell and man, between man and nature, between nature and Earth, or between Earth and solar system. The solar system seems lost in the distances of the Milky Way, as a single man would be lost on the surface of the Earth, were it not for the world of orderly world of nature of which he forms a part, and which mediates, so to speak, between him and it. The diameter of the Earth, for instance, is 1/millionth that of the solar system. But the diameter of the solar system is only perhaps 1/40 millionth that of the Milky Way. When in our own system we find such relationships, it is not between sun and planets, but between sun and satellites of planets. That is to say, by analogy of scale and mass, we should expect the solar system to be revolving about some greater entity, which in its turn was revolving about the center of the Milky Way, just as the moon revolves about the Earth, which in turn revolves around the sun. What and where is this sun of our sun? Several attempts have been made to discern a local system within the Milky Way, particularly by Charlier, who in 1916 seemed to have established such a group 2,000 light-years across and with its center several hundred light-years away in the direction of Argo. If we study our immediate surroundings in the galaxy, we find an interesting gradation of stars, two of which are suggestive from this point of view. Within 10 light-years, we find one star similar in scale to our Sun, and Sirius, over 20 times as bright. Between 40 and 70 light-years distance, we come upon 5 much larger stars, 100 to 250 times brighter than our Sun. Between 70 and 200 light-years, 7 greater still, 250 to 700 times brighter. And between 300 and 700 light-years, 6 immense giants, tens of thousands of times more brilliant. The greatest of these, Canopus, which lies 625 light-years behind in the exact wake of the solar system, and is 100,000 times more radiant than our Sun. This could indeed be the sun of Charlier's local system. But as in so many of these problems, it is only when we abandon astronomical theory and return to direct observation of the sky and heavenly bodies that we find a more immediate starry influence to which the solar system must be subject. For the most brilliant object in the heavens, after those within the solar system itself, is of course the double star Sirius. This consists of an immense radiant sun, 26 times more brilliant than our own, which circles in a 50-year period with a white dwarf as big as Jupiter and 5,000 times denser than lead. The mass of the light star being 2.5 times that of our sun, and that of the dark one equivalent to it. The influence upon the solar system of this starry pair, which lies at less than 9 light-years remove, must certainly far exceed that of any other extrasolar body that we can think of. By physical distance, as by radiance and mass, a Sirius system would seem in some way to fill the excessive gap between the cosmoses of the solar system and the Milky Way. Indeed, the distance from the Sun to Sirius, 1,000,000 times the distance from Earth to the Sun, falls naturally into the scale of cosmic relationships mentioned and provided 19th century astronomers with an excellent unit of celestial measurement, the Siriometer, now unfortunately abandoned. On purpose. No astronomical data contradict the possibility that the solar system circles about Sirius in the course of the latter circuit of the Milky Way, as Kant believed. For such a circling would only noticeably alter the position in the heavens of Sirius itself and of 2 or 3 other near stars, and with a periodicity of some hundreds of thousands of years, this could easily pass unnoticed. In fact, we have definite evidence to show that such is the case. As the ancient Egyptians observed, the apparent motion of Sirius, measured by its rising with the sun, is a little less than that of the apparent motion of all the other stars, which is recognized in the precession of the equinoxes. Whereas the general star mass rises 20 minutes later on a given day each year, Sirius rises only 11 minutes later. This corresponds to the difference in apparent motion between points outside a circle and the center of the circle itself when observed from a moving point on its circumference. Just as in the landscape seen from a moving car, far and near objects seem to run past each other. From such an observation, we have good reason to believe that our sun does circle about Sirius. And if we suppose the generally accepted figure of 20 kilometers a second for the sun's motion through space to be correct, then this circling would require 800,000 years. In other words, our sun would make some 250 revolutions about its greater sun for every full circuit of the Milky Way. Later we shall see that this figure of 800,000 years is equivalent to about a third the lifetime of nature, or a month in the lifetime of Earth, and that it fits very well with the general relation between cosmoses. Meanwhile, another very striking fact appears to confirm the idea of a local star system with Sirius as its center. We take the great familiar stars within, say, 40 light years of the Sun, Sirius, Procyon, Altair, Fomalhaut, Pollux, Vega, and so on. We find that all but two lie within 15 degrees of the same plane. There is only one likely explanation of this, that all the near stars revolve about a common center, and that this section is the ecliptic upon which their orbits lie. Supposing Sirius to be the sun of these suns, then our sun, curiously enough, appears to occupy a similar place in that system to that occupied by the Earth in the solar one. And if this is so, then the Sirian system may be regarded as almost exactly 1,000,000 times greater in diameter than the solar system, as the latter is 1,000,000 times greater in diameter than the Earth, and the Earth 1,000,000 times greater in diameter than an ordinary house. What kind of influence could reach us from the Sirian sun, with its strange combination of a radiance far greater than our solar radiation, and a density far more appalling than any conceivable in the darkest interior of the densest moon? We cannot know. Such super heaven and infra hell are unimaginable for us. Nor can we know whether the cosmic rays or any other super solar radiation is connected with us. We can only in a general way picture each of the worlds we have considered as bathed in radiations or influences from all the worlds superior to it, as our Earth is simultaneously bathed in cosmic rays and solar heat. The sum of these radiations will constitute the medium in which a world exists, and their variety will introduce the possibility of choice of response as between one influence and another. Seen from another point of view, this medium is composed of the sections of higher worlds. We have already compared our solar system within a section of the Milky Way to a cell within a section of the human body. The cell to the human section and our sun to the Milky Way are as points to planes. So we may say, as a law, that the medium in which any world lives and moves and has its being is to it as a plane is to a point. The cross-section of the human body is the plane in which the cell moves. The surface of the earth is the plane of nature in which man moves. The ecliptic of the solar system is the plane in which the earth moves. and the disk of the Milky Way is the plane in which the sun moves. Now the relation between a point and a line is infinity, and the relation between a line and a plane is again infinity. Thus the relation between a point and a plane is infinity squared. This means that they are doubly incommensurate. Two new dimensions have entered. And when we compare each world not with the section of the higher world which it inhabits, but with the complete body of that higher world, the comparison is between point and solid, or infinity cubed. The squaring or cubing of infinity can be best understood by the introduction of plan, purpose, and possibility. An infinite number of points make meaningless extension, but a point multiplied by infinity cubed can constitute a solid block on which one may sit. An infinite number of cells form only a mass of protoplasm, but cells multiplied by infinity cubed constitute a human body. An infinite number of organic bodies mean nothing but tons of flesh and sap, but organic bodies multiplied by infinity cubed constitute the harmonious world of nature. In the same way, though we cannot understand its significance, the Milky Way must be composed not of an infinity, but of an infinity cubed of suns. Yet, cell, human body, world of nature, Earth, solar system, and Milky Way are at the same time complete in themselves, each containing a pattern and possibility of the whole. Such entities connected by the sliding triad of dimensions with similar entities on larger and smaller scales are rightly called cosmoses. Two questions may arise in the mind at this point. First, what exactly constitutes a cosmos? And second, what grounds are there for assuming that higher and lower cosmoses than man are capable of intelligence and consciousness? The word cosmos with a K in Greek means order, harmony, right behavior, honor, a whole, the outward fashion of a whole, and finally the harmonious order of the whole, the universe in its perfection. As used by the Pythagoreans, it also meant a self-evolving or self-transcending whole. As we shall see in detail later, the possibility of self-evolution or self-transcendence implies a very special plan and structure, which some creatures have and others do not have. Thus, man, who possesses the possibility of perfecting and transcending himself, can be called a cosmos, whereas a dog, which seems to be a finished experiment with no further possibilities, cannot. By the same token, a sex cell, which can transcend itself into a man, is probably a complete cosmos, whereas a bone cell is not. A planet, which can transcend itself into a sun, is a complete cosmos, whereas an asteroid is not, and so on. The token of a true cosmos is in fact a particular kind of design referred to in the book of Genesis in the phrase, God created man in his own image. This divine image is the characteristics of which we must study in detail and can be found on all levels, is the hallmark of a cosmos. This in turn answers our second question, for whenever we find in nature or in the heavens the repetition of this exact design, which in the case of man we know to be accompanied by the possibility of intelligence and consciousness, we may presume that it makes possible intelligence and consciousness on that other scale. Just as we suppose that the blueprint of a dynamo makes possible the generation of electricity, wherever we find it materialized. Moreover, the greater cosmoses give rise to the smaller. We may also presume that they enjoy intelligence and consciousness in a higher degree, just as we assume the man who makes a clever machine is cleverer than the machine he makes. A book is composed of chapters, chapters of paragraphs, paragraphs of sentences, sentences of words, and words of letters. A letter and a word have significance on their own level, yet no true purpose apart from the whole book. So the universe, despite all our disability, so in the universe, despite all our disability, we strive to apprehend the higher cosmos in order to grasp the purpose of the lower.